He responded, "This is grave news, is it not?" And Almesia agreed, "Right. I've actually gotten hold of some very reliable information about it using my wealth and influence." And the Duke asked, "What is it?" Where Almesia responded, "It's really shocking. The place he wants to move to is that Tempest Federation you visited. What did you see when you last visited that nation?" This actually jogged Elalude's memory a bit. Every meal he had at Tempest was a delight, and his daughter Ellen practically wept tears of joy at first sight of their dessert selection. He remembered Ellen exclaiming excitedly, as expected from Shuna-san, "You were even able to recreate that new dish." Elalude willingly endured the blow. He then switched his mindset to discuss another thing. He asked, "By the way, madam, we should get back on track. How will we respond to Rimuru Dono?" Almesia grinned and said, "Yes, well. About that." She was keeping him in the loop without giving an answer. It was one of Elalude's duties as Duke to keep a watchful eye and act cautiously. A leisurely tour abroad may not have been a problem, but this was the monster kingdom he was going to. He feared there may be some individuals lying in wait, ready to use anything as leverage in order to take him down. She asked, "That demon lord is called Rimuru, right? He's no opponent to underestimate." And Duke Elalude asked back, "What do you mean?" Of course, Demon Lord Rimuru is a force to be reckoned with. He was obviously strong, yet his ability to exercise control over all monsters under his rule as well as having them obey his every order is no feat to be taken lightly. And there was never a demon lord who tried to build cooperative relationships with the nations around them before. However, this was all common sense. There was no way that Emperor Almesia would point it out without a reason. Considering this, Almesia posed a question. "Haha, this Rimuru, he rather easily accepted our request to build a highway to Sarian, didn't he?" And Elalude responded, "Yes. He asked for rights to things like tolls and custom fees, but he accepted the full construction job on his end." And Almesia confirmed, "That's precisely the point. Those rights could grant him an absolute fortune." "Dear Elalude, you should know just by looking at me, right?" Almesia turned back to her friendly self, and after having it pointed out to him, a sudden realization struck Elalude. He asked, "Should I call it a privilege?" Of course Elalude had noticed as well that what Rimuru saw value in was the privilege. That was why he thought carefully before giving him those rights. Yet Almesia sneered at Elalude, "You have a lot to learn still. Species with long life like us must always plan with long-term profits in mind first and foremost. Surely you should know this principle?" And Elalude said, "Of course. I made my decision after judging the passage fees the demon lord Rimuru could charge versus the money it would take for us to build the highway. Elalude thinks that Rimuru's offer is still a lot cheaper, though they need to pay toll. In fact, in order to construct a highway in the Jura Great Forest, notoriously plagued by monsters, it would require enormous funds and a lengthy amount of time. Between the border of Jura Great Forest and Sarian lay the Kasha Mountain, on top of which the aggressive tribe of Tengu resided, who held disdain for whoever arrived. One could only imagine the difficulty in trying to communicate with them. Even with that problem resolved, there were still many beasts and monsters left residing in the Great Forest. It would be a century-long project, and while that wasn't out of the question for an empire with Sarian's resources, it was doubtful they'd ever see a return on their investment. With all that in mind, Rimuru's offer was music to Elalude's ears. Then Emperor Almesia rejected his thoughts, how hopelessly naive. "Sure, it will be hard to explore that forest. To this day we haven't done so, because there is no benefit in doing that." Almesia began to elaborate upon her thoughts, attempting to enlighten Elalude. Just as Elalude thought, given the circumstances, making back the funding of construction would be infeasible. The difficulties of doing so were numerous, yet there would be little meaning to constructing such a road. However, that situation has changed. Before, the highway would have had to go all the way to the Dwarven Kingdom, and now, all it had to do was reach Tempest, the new nation in the middle of the woods. Naturally, the purpose for constructing roads was trade. Before, technological exchange with the dwarves would certainly help boost the nation's technological advancements. But in the end, it was just not worth the effort of having to accomplish such a colossal task. With that being said, The previous order had been entirely disrupted now that the Tempest Federation appeared. Almesia pointed out, the southern Demon Lord domains are ruled by Demon Lord Milam, while the two prominent figures Beast King Carrion and Sky Queen Frey all become her followers. With the overwhelming military power to back themselves, their nation will no doubt become prosperous. Beyond that, we have the western nations to the northwest and the armed nation of Dworgen to the north. Won't the relay hub of these nations be none other than the newly risen Tempest Federation? And Elalud answered, indeed, you have a point. He understood what Almesia was trying to get at. Though that was the case, he didn't perceive any severe error in his judgment. Suddenly he was overcome with a striking realization. As Almesia had pointed out, there hadn't been any benefit before, yet now that land within the Jura Great Forest was creating an infinite amount of value. That nation was cluttered at the center of many distinct nations. It was bound to become a meeting point of all their cultures, and it was destined to grow rapidly. That was what Demon Lord Rimuru wanted, and because Elalud had realized that, he wanted to confirm the diplomatic tie between their nations. But building a road to this new nation, as he knew full well, was a high-cost, high-risk endeavor. He said, my judgment was made considering that the construction work will inevitably require him to invest both funds and armed forces. It is probably more ideal to just pay the tolls and reap the benefits. He was confident he did the right thing and justified his agreement on the plan. Almesia's smile remained after hearing Elalud's answer and responded, you aren't incorrect. Given any normal circumstances, that would indeed have been the right decision to make, with minimal cost to our own nation. But he is just as long-lived as us. A demon lord, remember? One must always think twice when forming an accord with a permanent impact on the nation. That's why I give you 8 points out of 10. Elalud is speechless and can't seem to construct any response, so Almesia continued, we should also participate in the construction. Select some people and send them in a group to partake in the project. We should have selected personnel and built our own teams to handle the roadwork. If we are to at least be of some help, this effort would probably make our life easier when it comes to the negotiation of the toll. Elalud realized all this. All the rights derived from building the street would now permanently belong to Demon Lord Rimuru. And given their lack of cooperation at the beginning, these conditions would be frustratingly difficult to overturn. The opponent was a demon lord after all, rendering intimidation tactics through military force utterly foolhardy. After hearing Almesia's words, he couldn't help but agree. His single-minded focus on profits was wrong. Almesia said to him, this is why I accuse you of being stubborn, Elalud. You did well to know that the situation would be changing, but you can't always be bound by preconceived notions. His line of thought had always been that the construction would be too dangerous to carry out, yet if that weren't something one needed to consider, the construction budget wasn't really that high. And sending this own people from Sarian would have led to the sharing of technical expertise, which would allow the Empire to take in technological knowledge from Tempest. Elalud thinks to himself, what could he have done? He failed to read far into it. He could almost see Demon Lord Rimuru grinning from the shadows, but Elalud realized it was too late to regret now.